It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Green, gardening, and environment radio, flavored with a dash of humor. Welcome to intelligent, irreverent talk about plants and the planet they grow on. Your questions, comments, and participation are always welcome on Facebook and Instagram at The Mike Nowak Show and at Mike Now on Twitter.
Good planets are hard to find. Temperate zones and tropic climes. And true currents and thriving seas. Wind blowing through breathing trees. Strong ozone and safe sunshine. Well, good planets are hard to find. Good planets are in demand.
Brought to you by Bartlett Tree Experts. Every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com.
Jet streams, perfect air.
And here they are, Peggy Malecki and Mike Nowak.
Well, good planets are in demand. Right.
And good morning, everyone. Happy
Good
spring.
morning. Woohoo! Happy spring. Happy warm weather.
We get 2 days of spring, and then we jump right into July, and that's it. And goodbye.
Okay.
Don't want to see you.
Yeah, all the tulips, all the everything else will be whoop.
Yeah, well, my tulips are about done anyway, so I don't care.
Oh.
I don't have any late blooming tulips.
You
so
must have
I
really,
don't.
really early ones. I've only had
no,
a couple.
I have mid blooming tulips. I don't have I have one late one in the back. It's just about to pop, and it'll last like 10 minutes in 80-degree heat. I mean, and all you saw on, and folks, you should know, and watch that sound you'll be hearing in a second, our dials clicking off all over the country. Is Rick DeMaio is not here with us today. He's taking the month off and then taking more months off and then taking more months off. And then, yeah, so there we go. I'm playing with the color here. It's just a mess. I cannot get it. I cannot get it right.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
You look sunburned.
I know. That's what I'm thinking.
Like
okay.
you were out on your bicycle yesterday.
I was, but there wasn't enough sun. Okay, we can pull that back just a little bit. There we go. How's that? Is that better? Okay. You're doing my Technicolor issue tweaking here on live streaming, but yeah, here we are. I was watching the weather forecasts on the TNV, and they're all going, "Yay, 80 degrees!" And I'm thinking, I don't want 5 80-degree days in a row in May, really, or close to 90-degree days. Not really. I'd like. Can we like do 70s for a while? Would that be okay? Would that be fine with you? But
by the lake here, yeah, we'll be in the 60s and the 70s.
Well, that's
just
true.
because you live in an urban heat island.
Oh well, I get some of that effect, not as much as you do, because you live in a houseboat on Lake Michigan, and with all.
Is that where I live? I'd better go find that houseboat
with the 7,000 species of birds that you have there that you get to see every morning, like the orioles going to your oriole feeder. And I put the oriole feeder up, and twice now it has landed in the garden because probably a squirrel jumped on it, and so by the time I get to it, the oranges are covered in ants, and I don't know if the birds like them, but I put it back up in the hope that there will be an oriole someday, and I kind of doubt that I'll ever see one. So there you go.
But so in hour 2, I presume we're going to talk about the interesting bird you do have in your yard.
I do have some interesting birds. And
we're going to hold off until hour 2 on that, right?
Yeah, right. Hour 2.
Everybody in suspenders.
I like that. And that's Bob Dolgan of Monty and Rose fame. He's going to be on the show because next week is World Migratory Bird Day on the 14th. There's going to be a lot of different counts. They call it Big Day if you're part of the Cornell Ornithological Society.
We call it International Migratory Bird Day, National Migratory Bird Day, plain old Migratory Bird Day.
Right. It's a big day on the 14th this year, and a lot of people do bird counts. They do the spring bird counts. And Bob's going to talk about that. He's going to talk about why we haven't seen Rose come back to Montrose Beach. What do you mean? Maybe he won't talk about it.
No. Maybe why we haven't seen Rose come back.
Well, I don't know. He might know something about it, and he might not. Andrew says, "Why can't we? Can we just get a pic of Ricky D?
Sure.
We could. Okay, so there you go, Rick. Just for you, Rick DeMaio. That's all we get. Maybe I'll pop that up later on. Okay, Rick DeMaio,
who need an updated photo of Rick,
who needed 3 weeks to celebrate, whatever he's celebrating in the spring. So, but he is visiting his parents. So there you go. But at any rate, Bob Dolgan will be here at 10 o'clock to talk more about birds. We last week, what a great conversation with John Bates from the Field Museum. I hope that helped folks figure out whether they're going to keep their bird feeders up. We mentioned the Oriole feeders. That seems to be okay because the birds aren't only the Orioles come in, and then they punch the other birds away, right? Is that how that works? Are there no other birds in the world that like the fruit that the Orioles get?
I have actually seen downy woodpeckers land on.
Well, good. I would like
oranges.
to see.
Yeah, I mean, you'll occasionally see another bird, but not usually. It's more likely squirrels.
But at any rate, Bob will be here, and we'll talk about all things bird and the fact that his film Monty and Rose 2, The World of Monty and Rose, is premiering today, the 8th of May, on WTTW at 4 p.m. Public television in Chicago. So if you want to see that for free, 4 p.m., Monty and Rose 2, The World of Monty and Rose.
We'll have to ask him if it's also on the cable Window to the World channel that people elsewhere might be able to see.
Who knows?
Because Channel 11's got a couple cable channels that other places in the country you can see it.
But before we get to that, we're going to talk about an issue that, frankly, I was not aware of. And it was called to my attention recently, and it is the issue of artificial turf and whether it is safe to have artificial turf outside of our schools and in our parks, because there's so much that goes into it. It's not as simple as, wow, you lay it down, you leave it, it'll last forever, you'll never have to mow, and everything is going to be right with the world. No, that's not the way it works. And there are apparently around 13,000 artificial turf fields in the country now. That number grows by 12 to 1,300 every year. So maybe we should be talking about this a little bit. And so let's talk about that. Let's bring in our group of guests here, and I'm going to put my glasses on because I can't read anything that small without them. On the right of your screen is Yuh Schabacker-Koppel, and she is a resident of Lake Forest, Illinois, and she also started a group called Green Minds, LFLB, which stands for Lake Forest, Lake Bluff. You're also part of another group that is fighting the issue of the artificial turf, and that is Go Real, Go Grass. So both of those you can find on Facebook. If you go to my Facebook post from today, you will see the links to both of those organizations. In your lower left is Mary Galea, who is a Lake Forest resident who's been involved in this issue. She's also a biologist, or has studied biology, got her degree in biology from Kent State. On the right, Ryan Anderson, who's a friend of the show from Midwest Grows Green. He has been with us a number of times. Not only are we going to talk about artificial turf with Ryan Anderson, but we're also going to talk about a new certification program where municipalities and groups who want to do parks and green areas can do it by putting in lawns that don't use chemicals, that do it naturally, do it safely. And Ryan's going to talk about that too. But I want to start with you. and I'm sorry that I laugh when I say that, but you must have grown up, or as long as you've been in the United States, you get jokes like that all the time, I imagine you.
I do. I went to boarding school in England, and that was the biggest joke at school there.
Okay.
Well.
So you'll forgive me if I giggle from time to time about that. But actually, you're an activist. You've been involved in a lot of different things that are quite interesting. How is it that the idea of artificial turf came to your attention?
So from the very beginning, I've been skeptical of synthetic turf. We've always known that you're supposed to wash the clothes of the kids. They're supposed to take their shoes off when they come inside from practice. My big concern when we heard about this big complex was the athlete safety, because I have a son who was injured on synthetic turf in 8th grade, and he was out of sports for almost an entire year. And I don't want to see any other athletes or children go through that kind of pain and that kind of unnecessary kind of accidents. And then I started studying more about it when I heard that they were going to put that in here. And the more I learned, the more mortified I got, and my environmental stomach just turned and said, no, we can't do that. It just doesn't make sense.
All right. And we should get to the particulars of this. This is going to be in Lake Forest. There's Deer Path Park is an area where the Park District of Lake Forest wants to put in 10.5 acres. We're not talking about one field here. We're talking about how many fields would 10.5 acres?
That is equivalent to 7.5 football fields.
Wow. All right. That's a lot of artificial turf. And it did go to a vote. And we've been down this path before, Peggy and I, on this show with various issues, environmental issues in various municipalities, Chicago, Skokie, Schaumburg. Yeah, where these things happen and folks feel like they have not had a say in it. Do you feel like you've had a say in what is happening to this field?
So in Go Real Go Grass, we all feel we didn't have a say, and also in Green Minds. The Parks and Recs, they do say that they have had input from us, but they started off, we only learned about it in the fall, and they're basing it off a master plan that they created last year in 2020, with input from 4 members from 4 private clubs and 1 vocal resident very much wanting synthetic turf. And we're hearing that resident has ties to the synthetic turf industry. So we don't feel that that's a very, very representative group of people to bring into a focus group to ask what the community wants. Private clubs, some of them not even in Lake Forest, shouldn't be determining what is best for our community.
Okay, as it stands right now, has the 10.5 acres been formally approved, or are there more steps to take?
So there's a few more steps. The design phase of the 10.5 acres synthetic turf fields have been approved. So they're spending over $400,000 on designing a synthetic turf project. And then
wait! They're spending $400,000 on what?
On just making the design.
Oh, okay, for just the design, and then afterward, and I've seen some of the charts you've sent me, and from what I understand, you're saying that the final cost will be in the neighborhood of what, $6 to $7 million? Is that correct?
So the final cost of the entire athletic complex is they've estimated $11.8 million.
Oh.
That But some of it probably would have been, we would pay for that anyway, because they need to drain and grade these fields and put proper drainers in for these fields anyway, whether they do natural grass or synthetic turf. So the final cost is probably for just synthetic turf. The extra cost is $67 million. But they're planning to take out a general municipal bond of $12 million. So that's going to burden our taxpayers tremendously.
All right, let's go to Mary, because you know a little bit about biology. First, let me ask you, how did you get involved in this issue?
Well, I heard about this issue shortly after we moved to Lake Forest. We moved here for all of its wonderful green space and what seemed like vibrant ethic of land stewardship. And I heard about it and went, oh my gosh, this 10-acre synthetic turf complex is going to go right around behind and next to the middle school where my daughter will attend at some point.
All right, and what, in terms of biology, because you have that background, gives you pause about the idea of artificial turf?
Sure, that's right. So I do have a degree in biology. I also have a master's degree in natural resource management and have worked with the federal government, private industry, and nonprofits. And what really gives me pause, first and foremost, as a mom, that as a young child at a developmentally critical period in her life, my daughter will, and the other children at the middle school, will be exposed to microplastics, endocrine, thyroid, and hormone disruptors, again, at this very critical developmental period of middle school. And that really gave me pause. But secondly, you know, as a citizen, it seems as if we're swimming in plastic, and the world seems to be moving away from plastic and off fossil fuels. And for good reason. You know, 80% of humans now have have microplastics in their blood. And it's just been found that we have microplastics even in our lungs. So when you think about the biology of that definitely gave me pause.
All right. Well, let's look at the issue of, and I think we might bring Ryan into this as well, because as you pointed out, they had to do drainage anyway on the field. In fact, let me start there. Why couldn't you put a natural turf, if you're going to do the drainage anyway, wouldn't that, and that seems to be one of the issues, that the field aren't playable during, and I bet in this spring it's been pretty awful in that area. We've had a lot of rain recently, although we were dry earlier. But why couldn't a natural turf do just as well, Ryan?
It can do pretty well. I mean, obviously, after you need probably a day or so to let the turf dry out. But if you apply compost top dressing, that's a great way to reduce or improve the drainage of your athletic fields. And that's what we've been really promoting with a couple of our park districts here that Midwest Grows Green is working with.
So you already have examples of how that can work.
Correct. Yeah, and we have a number of park districts. I think Wilmette Park District is a pretty good example. Christy Solberg has worked out there, and she's added a lot of organic fertilizers, try to do some compost, and she's been able to keep her fields in play even after heavy rain events.
All right, getting back to the field and what they're trying to accomplish, one of the arguments for it is that, well, we already have natural turf in the area. We want to give people a choice. They can decide to play on this turf, or they can decide to play on the natural turf. And you're smiling when I say that. Why?
Yeah, so they're talking about giving people a choice, but with this, they're not going to give any of the families at Deer Park Middle School a choice, because outdoor PE is going to be at these fields. And children with asthma or eczema or other health issues, they might not be able to play in these fields. And then they won't be able to participate in outdoor PE. And that's not giving everybody a choice.
All right. Go ahead, Peggy.
I was, and we're probably going to be getting to this, but for listeners that might not be familiar with why the artificial turf is a potential health problem. You're saying for anything from endocrine disruptors to asthma and everything else.
So the synthetic
But
turf, a synthetic turf field is made out of 40,000 pounds of just one average synthetic turf field of 40,000 pounds of plastic carpet. This plastic carpet, all of them, there's not one brand that does not contain PFAS. PFAS are very controversial at the moment, and it's on everybody's radar. They're banning it in EU. EPA is coming out with new thresholds.
PFAS. PFAS,
yeah. And then they also have 400,000 pounds of infill. Most of the traditional infill is rubber-based that we all know, and we all know from our old prom tires, and we all know that it contains PFAS, lead, mercury, all sorts of other nasty chemicals that we don't want our kids near. And they have some natural alternatives now, but they mix these natural alternatives with silica sand that's treated and also contains PFAS and lead, and that dust the kids will inhale. There's issues of heat exhaustion because these plastic fields they contain the heat, so the heat doesn't cool down. Actually, they'll create the whole area will get hotter around a synthetic turf. So the kids, they will get turf burns, and we all have seen turf burns, and that's why it's called turf burns. When they rub up against these hot surfaces, they'll get turf burns, and they will sometimes, when it gets really hot, over 86 Fahrenheit ambient temperature is going to create the field to like 130 Fahrenheit, and they're going to start having burns on them from touching it with their skin.
By the way, we talked about PFAS, PFAS, as Peggy noted. They're polyfluoroalkyl substances. Mary, do you know anything about these substances and about the harm they might do?
Sure, I do know a little bit. Most people are familiar with, Teflon products. That's where they really started to enter our kind of general environment. They never break down. So the reason why they're called forever chemicals is because once they're out in the environment, either in our water or even in our blood, they're never going to go away. So that is definitely a danger. Another, the other component is the microplastic component. These synthetic turf fields only last 7 to 10 years before they're ripped up and completely replaced. So this truly creates an endless cycle of plastic and fossil fuel dependency for the communities that choose to install these fields.
Right. You know what I want to do is show. I went off to a field in my neighborhood yesterday. It was a nice day. It was a sunny day. Thought, that
would be Logan Square in the city.
That would be Logan Square. Here's what we're talking about. Here's a typical synthetic field, and you can see the kids playing on it, and it looks really nice. I think one of the reasons folks like them is because they're neat. We, as a society, as a culture, value neatness probably as much as anything in the whole world. But what I did is decided to take a close look, and here's what we're talking about. This is called rubber crumb.
Infill.
This is infill, rubber crumb, and as you can see in the artificial turf beyond my hand, it's completely covers it. As you pointed out, the turf itself contains about 40,000 for an average field. For an average field, the turf itself contains about 40,000 pounds of plastic carpeting, but another 400,000 pounds of infill, and it's often this rubber crumb.
And that's to keep the artificial blades standing, right?
Well, it does a number of things. One of which, yes, that's one of the things to keep the blades upright. But from what I understand, you and Mary, it also softens the kids falling down and adults falling down on this. It softens the blow because those are very hard surfaces, aren't they?
They're extremely hard surfaces, and that is a danger for the athletes. There's different levels. It's called Tmax of hardness of an athletic field. A professional team, they are maximum allowed to play. They are not allowed to play on any fields with a higher Tmax than 100. Often these fields, especially for the schools and how they're designed in park districts, they have way over 100 Tmax levels. Sometimes we see them higher than 200, which is actually they're not supposed to play on them, but that does happen. They do sometimes when they use natural infills, they put a shock pad underneath instead because the natural infills are harder. They're talking about olive pits for Lake Forest, a combination of olive pits and silica sand, and these olive pits are very, very hard. I don't know if you've ever tried to bite through an olive and hit the pit.
I would think sharp. I would think that would be sharp too.
So they grind them up and treat them, these olive pits, and then they mix it with the silica sands and use it as infill, and that's very hard. So they need to put a shock pad, more plastic underneath, which is often out of a styrene, also containing PFAS and all sorts of plastics we don't want to have in our community and we're trying to get rid of plastic. Everybody talks about reducing plastic straws and plastic bags, but that's nothing compared to what the amounts that they're putting in here.
All right. And the other thing we haven't even mentioned is what happens at end of life. Now, and one of the arguments for using artificial turf is that it's going to cost less because you don't have to replace it. You don't have to keep up with the maintenance. But as you pointed out, the lifespan is usually, average lifespan is under 10 years, which means that you're starting all over again. And this is a very huge expense to put this in. And in a matter of probably 7, 8, 9, 10 years, you're replacing it. But the other thing is, what happens to this?
In the case of Lake Forest, that's 10 acres being replaced.
Yeah. And where is that going? Well, as it turns out, pretty much nowhere. You got to go to my blog. Go to MikeNowak.net, and you should read some of these stories that are out there. There was one in the Atlantic that I linked to called "The Dangerous Pileup of Artificial Turf," and how we haven't figured out where it can go. It ends up often in landfills, and sometimes worse. Not just landfills, but sometimes they just dump it on the sides of hills and into valleys, and just because
next to waterways
where all of this fill and the plastics will leach into our waterways. You could look at this issue and say maybe the main problem we have is that we don't know what to do with this stuff at the end of life. There's no thought about where it goes afterward. And that alone, some people, they cut it up and they'll give it to people they can use for their yards. Well, what happens then after they use it from their yards? They're still the end of life. It's still going to be there someplace. And I would add, and what's happening in the breakdown then? You take something that's end of life, you're reusing it, it's all over everyone's feet, it's running off, it's outgassing, you're shaking your head.
Yes, it's just terrible, and they're saying that they want to recycle it. They're planning to recycle it at some stage. They've been saying that for 10 years. It still hasn't happened, but I spoke to the general manager of one of these recycle facilities in Europe, and he told me that when they recycle it, either they incinerate it, I don't see that as recycling, or they repurpose it into landscaping materials and building materials. So they're spreading out all these chemicals even further, and they can't get rid of the chemicals. And we know that these PFAS that's in the synthetic turf fields is the same PFAS that the firefighters are fighting right now. That's why we see a lot of firefighter families opposing synthetic turf.
And in this story, Diana Conway, president of the not-for-profit Safe Healthy Playing Field, says crumb rubber is notorious for migrating with the tiny tire pellets sticking to. And by the way, you got to remember, these are ground-up tires. This is what we, in the 90s, when we started doing these athletic fields, some folks thought this is it, that we figured out how to recycle our tires. But no, we just pushed it down the road. We put the tire crumb into these fields, and then at the end of that life, we still don't know what to do with the tire crumb. And these, by the way, these carpets in landfills and wherever else they dump them, if they catch fire, they burn for a long time. It's really hard to control that stuff. At any rate, back to this, they're notorious for migrating with the pellets sticking to players' skin and socks and spreading into nearby environment. While that alleged risk has received widespread media attention, most people give little thought to the sheer weight and volume of refuse involved in disposal of used playing fields, and says Conway, who's a retired attorney from Montgomery County, Maryland. So all of this adds up. So when we come back, we need to take a short break. There are other issues that we've just barely touched on. Among them, the heat island effect of this. Mm-hmm. But one thing we have not touched on really at all is the effect on athletes of playing on these surfaces, mm-hmm. the injuries that occur because of the hardness of these surfaces. When we come back, I want you to bring your son Jocum in, because he's a student athlete, so we can talk about this a little bit. And we'll get then to Ryan, because the alternative obviously is to grow natural turf. But if you're going to grow natural turf, and we talk about it all the time on this show, please do it wisely, which means don't go slathering it with pesticides and too much fertilizer. Do it right. Do it naturally. And we're going to talk to Ryan about a certification program that's going to encourage municipalities to do it right. It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. More when we return.
This is Vic from Happy Leaf. Today we're going to talk about how grow lights work. Plants need three things. They need water, they need nutrients, and they need light. The sun provides wonderful light for growing plants outdoors, but indoors you need a grow light. So how do grow lights work? We know what kinds of colors plants like, so various types of grow lights are made for different types of plants. Recently, LED grow lights have made a dramatic improvement in the types of grow lights we can make. The red light allows us to make the plant grow vertical and to flower, and the blue light makes the plant bushy and strong. Happy Leaf LED grow lights have the precise red and blue to make plants grow very well. We know that plants look happy if they're green to us, but remember that they reflect green light as opposed to using it.
From spring seed and soil treatments to summer foliar feeding to fall stubble digesters, Blazing Star provides microbial tools from tiny biologicals for natural and organic farmers. They have solutions for home gardeners too. And Blazing Star offers agroecological education and consulting, especially for permaculture work in zones 4 and 5. Learn more about these great folks at blazing-star.com.
Life is an ocean, streaming alone, ripples of motion, hitting us all, yeah.
Dive in, your time to win, our hearts all in, let's let the fun begin. Take a dive, take a dive, take a dive. Take a dive, take a dive, take a dive. I see you striving dive. I see you climbing dive. I see you diving. Dive smart, dive smart, dive
And welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. We're talking to Yuh Schabacker-Koppel and Mary Galea from Lake Forest, where they are trying to stop an artificial turf being put on 10.5 acres in Deer Path Park. Ryan Anderson from Midwest Grows Green is here with us. We mentioned just before the break that one of the problems with artificial turf is how hard the surfaces are, literally. There's an article that I linked to in my blog post about how NFL stars, National Football League stars, have started a petition to ban artificial turf in football after Odell Beckham's Super Bowl injury. And that was on artificial turf. And that is, there are soccer leagues in the world who have started to move away from this. The National Football League has been urging teams to use natural turf, natural grass, because it just seems so much safer for the athletes. We have a student athlete here now, Jocum Schabacker. Jocum, welcome. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So,
Welcome.
what kind of sports do you play?
So I play soccer and basketball. So obviously soccer would be addressing the synthetic turf issue.
Yeah. All right. And what kind of issues have you seen with athletes? Have you known athletes, your fellow athletes who've been injured on the hard surfaces?
Yeah, definitely. So this season we initially started playing on natural grass due to the fact we couldn't actually play on synthetic turf since it was too hot. We had a pretty hot fall, so the trainers wouldn't allow us to play on synthetic turf. So we were all on natural grass. Then as soon as we shifted over to synthetic turf, we started seeing an immediate increase in shin splints and stress on the knees and ankles because it's really hard. So when you're playing 2-3 hours at a consistent high level pace, the stress really impacts your body. And then also recently, one of my teammates over the season, he got his cleat stuck, just like you mentioned Odell Beckham Jr. in the Super Bowl. He got his cleat stuck in the turf and actually tore his meniscus, and he was out for the rest of the season. Just one of those fortunate events that you hear of consistently with athletes on turf.
Have you encountered any heat island effects on the turf?
Right. Like I mentioned before, we were actually not allowed to play on turf when it was really hot. So when we were driving past, our turf fields are right next to the grass fields. So we drive past, you could see almost like the heat radiating off the turf. And we had to, when we play on turf and when it's really hot, we have to have regular pauses when it's really hot.
Go ahead, Peggy.
So one of the reasons that when I was reading through your Green Minds website and other sites too is claiming that when natural grass is wet, you can't play, so they're losing more playing time. But if it's too hot, you guys aren't playing. If there's other conditions, you're not playing. I mean, is that real, or is that just?
It sounds like it kind of balances out. I mean, if you can't play if it's wet, but if it's so hot that you're going to be injuring athletes, you can't play then either. And you could do that on natural turf.
Right. So typically, we're seeing an influx of adverse weather patterns of consistent heat and flooding. The fields actually flood really quick, a lot, really easily. So we actually can't play on synthetic turf. Also, when it rains a lot, because the fields just flood. And then with natural grass, it also floods. But typically, when it starts flooding, we can't play on natural grass. We actually go inside and watch film or practice on our ball handling or cardio. So we're still getting the exercise and performance and getting better every day.
Well, what about that? The issue of flooding that seems to be.
Yeah, I was going to ask Ryan if he could comment on that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so there's different fields with natural grass where you can have drainage tiles and stuff like that, but most of our fields, I would say, in park districts do not have the appropriate drainage or anything like that. But you can definitely have, we have a whole field construction that talks about different strategies to improve drainage so that you can keep your fields in play. for longer. But and that's a lot cheaper. These options are a lot cheaper than just installing an artificial turf field.
And all of this gets us back to the financial issue. Where do we stand on the finances for this? I imagine that the proponents of artificial turf would tell you that it's going to be cheaper in the long run. What I read and the research I did, which is in my blog post, if you want to go take a look at it, tells me that at best, no pun intended, it's a wash. That you can do the same thing probably in terms of cost with either way, but then of course you won't have the chemical issues with the natural turf that you do with the artificial turf. Ryan, you sent me some information that indicated that the cost is really not a factor here.
Yeah, so at the very low end, artificial turf field will cost about $80,000, and then you have to consider the cost of maintenance. So you still need to maintain that turf if you're being appropriate, because it could have MRSA, so you need to use some biocides to kill out any pathogens for humans. So that's about $5,000 per year, and then you have to add some infill, because the infill, as you said, you can take it home on your cleats and stuff like that. So you need to replace that.
It migrates, as they say. It migrates.
Yeah, and it probably washes out in a flood too, I would imagine.
Yeah. So there's costs associated with that replacement of the infill. And then finally, after 10 years, you need to replace it. So then you add another 80,000, and that's at the extremely low end. A natural grass field is a lot less expensive, because all you need to do is apply that grass seed, which is not that much. It's like a couple thousand. And then you have a couple thousand that goes with the fertilizer treatment. What we want is organic fertilizers, and compost top dressing is the other cost with natural grass fields. So it does even out, and most of the time when we see it, a natural grass field will be cheaper.
I want to get back to the biology and the MRSA thing, because that is a whole different area. But what this highlights here is this thought, this mentality, and we've talked about it on this show before, even with gardens in people's own backyards. They often say, I want a low-maintenance garden. And what they really mean is they want a no-maintenance garden. They don't want to be bothered. And so folks get this idea in their head. They say, oh, look, artificial turf. We put that down, we're done. We'll never, ever, ever have to deal with that again. And obviously, as we're saying, that's not true, because the fill is going to wash out. It's going to migrate. The turf can get ripped up at certain points. There are articles I read about gophers coming up through the middle of the field. So maybe you have to put a metal grid underneath that just to prevent things like that happen. There's no such thing as a free lunch, is what I'm trying to tell people. There's no such thing as a surface you put down outside and you never have to deal with again, even if you put this in your own backyard. And one of the issues is, it was interesting, there was an article in the New York Times where they don't recommend at all.
Oh yeah, the wire cutters article.
The wire cutters did an article. They don't even recommend it for home use. Even if it's a tiny little area, they say, you know what, you look at that, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work.
The interesting thing is, they went in with the proposal. Their hypothesis was, yeah, we're going to be recommending synthetic turf, and the more they learned about it, they ran the other way.
It's an amazing story. If you go to the blog post, look for the link that says the experts don't even suggest you get artificial turf for your own backyard, and I've got a link there. And as Peggy said, they went in with the mindset, we're just going to pick the best company and then recommend it to people. And they came away from it saying, we don't recommend artificial turf at all for the home use. And now you might say, well, we're going to have professionals install this for a large field like a deer path in Lake Forest. Still, that's very expensive, and that's where a lot of the expense comes. Doing it right, because you have to grade it, you have to put things down smoothly, and then you have to do it right. So, that said, no free lunch. MRSA. Mary, can I throw this in your court a little bit? Not specifically about MRSA, because I know you're probably not an expert on that, but the idea of biological agents being on the surface of these fields.
Sure. So from what I understand, because the fields are made up of plastic, it creates a really good environment for bacteria to grow and other infectious microbes out there to grow. And because they get so hot, and they just don't wash away and wash clean like natural surfaces do. So then you do have to apply antimicrobials, which in essence are pesticides, to make sure that the athletes, when they do rub up against the fields and get those, turf burns, that they then don't also get an infection afterwards. So this is part of that not so maintenance-free component of this, that, with natural grass, yes, you do have to do some maintenance, but you certainly don't have to apply antimicrobials to it, because the microbes are able to break down much more easily on the natural surface than they are the synthetic surface. So this is definitely, a health and safety maintenance component that has to be done with synthetic turf fields.
Okay, I want to get to. Okay, Peggy, go ahead, and then we'll wrap this up so we can get to Ryan.
So I was going to say part of what you're doing with Green Minds, Lake Forest, Lake Bluff, and the your Go Real Go Grass group is a Change.org petition. And some other things
Thank you for
within the
mentioning that.
community.
Yes, yeah.
So I was going to ask if you could talk about that a little bit, please.
So we've tried to put some pressure on the city to try and at least consider natural grass. They haven't been very willing so far, but we do have a change petition because we think it's important that they see that there is a voice of residents who doesn't want this. And there's really different residents who doesn't want it for different reasons. There's residents who's against it for the fiscal impact on the taxpayers. There is residents who are against it for the safety of the children. There's residents that's against it because it was a community park. Now we're going to get these synthetic turfs, which often entails gated areas where you can't bring dogs, you can't bring food, you can't do all these other things. And then on and on. And so our change petition has over 900 signatures. We're getting close to 1,000. And we have had more people call into the city and email the city against this, and still they voted against what the residents asked, the majority of the residents asked. So we're still hoping that we can put some pressure that they at least try and look at reducing the footprint of this complex and maybe reduce the size, because it's just so stomach churning to think of that they're willing to put this is going to be the second largest in our entire area fields, and it's right in a floodplain next to Skokie River. It's an area that floods all the time. It's not like the largest one is in Schaumburg. That's next to a highway, and Schaumburg caters to 80,000 residents. We cater to 20,000 residents, and then we just don't give the children a choice. It's right next to it.
Yeah, and as you point out, a lot of the neighboring communities have big athletic fields that aren't artificial.
Maybe Jocum, you can tell about that.
Right. So up in Waukegan, they actually have a really nice all-natural grass fields, a couple complexes where actually pro teams and semi-pro teams take these fields and preserve them because they're super nice. And there's a reason why they prefer this. There's a synthetic turf, really nice synthetic turf right next to it, but they rather play on these all natural grass because it's just playability is nicer. It's a whole different game playing on synthetic turf. And like you said, like we mentioned before, injuries are a lot less common and frequent.
All right. Well, I wish you luck. Peggy and I, as we mentioned earlier, have seen this play out before, and the group of concerned citizens gets involved. The community expresses its wishes, and then the powers that be ignore them. and go ahead with their plans anyway. Now, I don't know how many in your community. From what I understand, there's people on both sides of this issue who think that a synthetic turf would just be delightful. But I don't think they understand the issue as clearly as they could, and I hope that some of those people were listening to this show today. So I'm just going to say good luck in putting this together, because I want to get to Ryan now, because Ryan obviously is is in favor of natural turf, but doing natural turf the right way. And you're about to have a couple of seminars this week where you're going to promote the Green Shield certified GSC for landscapes certification. Tell us a little bit about that, Ryan.
Yeah, so we've talked to a lot of people, and people get confused with these terms of organic, natural, sustainable landscaping. So we actually wanted to find that what it means to provide a sustainable landscaping service, or provide an organic landscaping service, or to actually manage space without synthetic pesticides and fertilizers. So that's what Green Shield Certified for Landscapes does, or GSC for short. It's a guide and evaluation of about 40 minimum requirements, and then about 105 scored practices in total. And these companies or these municipalities that we're evaluating, we have to do an on-site evaluation every 3 years. They need to pass all those minimum requirements, and then they need to score 80% or above on these scored practices to achieve the Green Shield certification. And they need to do that every 3 years. So they need to continue to maintain their landscapes sustainably. And so we have that credible recertification every 3 years. It's a very rigorous system. And then if they achieve these standards, consumers, residents, they can feel better that they know that this landscape is being managed without synthetic chemicals, or with very limited synthetic chemicals, based on our standards.
So basically, it's a chance for a municipality to say, "Hey, look at us. Your kids can feel safe on there. You can feel that your kids are safe on our parks and on our lawns."
Correct. Yeah. And it's evaluated by a third party person, the IPM Institute. So I'm one of the evaluators, and we're working on coming up with a couple other expert evaluators for whatever type of landscape you want. We can do turf grass. That's my expertise, but we're also looking for natural areas too. So limited use of glyphosate, and only using it when it's absolutely necessary. And then obviously there's components of proper native plantings, and reducing erosion, reducing runoff into our waterways.
And now, I was not familiar with Green Shield certified, but that's part of the IPM Institute of North America, right? Just as Midwest Grows Green is part of the IPM Institute of North America.
Yeah, correct. So Green Shield Certified has been around for 20 years now.
Really?
And
Okay.
it started as a certification system for indoor pest control. So we have about 30 companies and about two large headquarters, like Morgan Stanley, I believe, that have been evaluated by Green Shield Certified and are Green Shield Certified companies. And any residents or consumers know that these companies are applying our integrated pest management approach, and only applying pesticides if absolutely necessary, using all these low toxic practices like exclusion, sanitation, and everything like that for indoors. So we're just applying this concept of Green Shield Certified for indoors to Green Shield Certified for landscapes.
All right, and you have a couple of webinars next week. Let's pop up this one, because this is the first webinar. Mackenzie Feldman, this is on Tuesday, correct? Tuesday, May 10th.
Yeah, so on Tuesday we're going to have three speakers. One is going to be myself, and I'm going to talk about how you can get your sustainable landscaping project up and running. So yes, that has aspects of funding, but also partnerships with nonprofits like Midwest Grows Green, but we have 2 other representatives that do sustainable landscape initiatives. Mackenzie is one from Herbicide Free Campus. They're relatively new, but they've been working with a lot of universities to eliminate their herbicide use. A lot in California, but I know they have one in Iowa, and they're spreading across the country. And then Jim Kleinwachter from the Conservation Foundation and his Conservation at Home program. So he's going to talk about how you can partner with the Conservation Foundation for native planting projects and natural areas.
And then well, we have a photo of you. There you are, as well. And then there's another presentation on Thursday.
Yeah, and so this one is more formally introducing the GSC for landscapes. So there are 3 components to GSC for landscapes, or 3 things that you can get evaluated on: design, installation, and maintenance. And so I'm going to cover each of those components. And if you are a lawn care company that only does maintenance, you can just pursue the maintenance part. But if you are a landscape architect that only does design and installation, you can choose to only pursue that design and installation components, and you don't need to go through the maintenance. So that's a cool thing about GSC for landscapes is we are hitting anybody that is in the landscaping sector, from a landscape designer to landscape manager, all the way to the landscape company, and as well as municipalities, park districts, and schools.
Yeah, that's very cool that you're reaching out to all aspects of it. So get everybody on board, not just the municipalities, because if they're going to want to do this, they got to be able to find the landscapers who can do this right and be certified. Yeah. So
and I popped the link to Midwest Grows Green Week up in the chat here.
Yeah. So the point of all of this, as we wrap up here, is showing that, you can do large areas and do them naturally and do them well and do them without unnecessary chemicals, pesticides, synthetic fertilizers, if you know what you're doing. One of the things I wanted to pop up here, because you went out this morning, and took some photos, just so folks get an idea of what we're talking about in Lake Forest. I'm sorry I didn't show this earlier, but here's a panoramic view. This field, which now this is all natural turf at the moment, this is the field that they want to turn into the synthetic field. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So
again, this is up in Lake Forest, Deerpath Park.
It looks pretty nice to me. I mean, I know it. Obviously, right now it's flooding, but from time to time, and might have other issues. But like I said, nothing is perfect, and you have to work at any field to get it the way you absolutely want it. And in this case, it seems to me that the safer route is to go with the natural route, And all the information, we have actually a link to your petition online on my blog post. And again, if you have any interest in this subject, I would tell folks, read up on it. It is, it's pretty much new to me. I did not know about this. And so I want to thank you guys for introducing me to this issue. So now I have something else I can lie awake nights thinking about.
And worry about,
really. Anything you want to say as we wrap up, you and Mary?
Mary, do you want to go?
I would just like to say, sure. I truly feel like there has to be a solution besides 10.5 acres of synthetic turf that meets the needs of these athletes, the middle school kids, and the broader community. I think one great place to start would be to shrink the footprint. Maybe it is a mix of synthetic turf and natural grass, but certainly working with experts like Ryan to find these long-term resilient solutions seems to be in the best interest of everybody, especially our children.
So that sounds like a compromise position to me, Mary.
Yeah, I mean, 10.5 acres of plastic is just such a large volume that, creates this, massive demand for fossil fuels and plastics. To do that in perpetuity just seems counter to everything that the rest of our actions, as a nation and as a world, we're trying to move away from. So, there has to be a better way moving forward, and there are experts to help us get there.
Yeah, and let's keep in mind, we don't know what we're going to do with it when we're finished with it. At the end of its life, 10.5 acres of plastic and rubber crumb is going to get rolled up and dumped somewhere. And out of sight, out of mind. That's the way the world works. Yuh Schabacker-Koppel, Mary Galea, Ryan Anderson, thank you all for being with us on the program. Very important stuff, and glad you could spend a Sunday morning with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
When we come back, we're talking birds with Bob Dolgan, so we hope you stick around.
Hey, good morning, Dr. Borden. How you doing today?
Hey, Victor. I'm doing great. What can I do for you?
Up on the upper branches of this juniper tree, there's something that looks really bizarre that caught my eye. And I thought I'd give you a call to see if you could tell us a little bit more about it and whether or not we should be concerned.
I bet I can help. Is it by any chance a brown, lumpy structure about the size of a golf ball?
It is, and it has these really bizarre porcupine quills sticking out of it.
Oh, yeah. Great find, Victor. So this is a disease called cedar apple rust. And in one of my previous jobs, I spent some time working on this at the Virginia Tech Research Station in Winchester. So I'd be happy to tell you a little bit more about it. Good news is that it's not really harmful to your eastern red cedar there. You might see that twig that the gall is on turn a little bit yellow, but it's no big deal. You can just prune it out. But Victor, are there by any chance any apples or crabapple trees nearby?
There are. I believe there's a crabapple up the hill, and I do know it to be true that there are some fruit-producing apple trees in the backyards of this neighborhood.
That makes a lot of sense. So this is a very interesting fungus. It bounces back and forth between usually the eastern red cedars and apples and crabapples, and it requires both groups of plants to complete its life cycle. So if you go and scout your crabapples and apples nearby, you might see little yellow spots on the leaves, and that's the exact same fungus. So what's happening is that those galls on your eastern red cedar are going to release really small spores that blow on the wind, and when they land on young, tender apple and crabapple leaves, they'll form these little yellow spots. And then later in the season, those yellow lesions are going to produce spores that travel back to the eastern red cedars, and the cycle starts all over again. So it can be a very important disease on the apples and crabapples.
So if you're a homeowner that wants to prioritize your apple trees, would it be a good option to remove the cedar tree?
You know, that's a great thought. In fact, historically, that's exactly what they did, especially in the early 1900s. They would go and try to remove all eastern red cedars within a several-mile radius of commercial apple orchards. We don't need to do that today, thankfully, and there's a couple of good reasons. First, we have some very effective fungicides that if you apply them at the right time in the season, do a great job at preventing infection on apples and crabapples. Also, we don't want to be removing eastern red cedars if possible, because they are great habitat and food for a lot of our native birds. And then the third thing you can do is plant resistant varieties. So these trees behind me, these are Golden Delicious apples. It's a great apple, but it's very susceptible to this disease. But there are a lot of varieties now that are resistant to it, and that's a great management tool.
So if you're a homeowner that wants fruit-bearing apple trees, choosing the right variety sounds like it might go a long way in managing this disease.
Absolutely right, Victor. It's well worth your time to do that research up front.
Fascinating. Well, Matt, once again, I want to thank you for your time, and as always, thank you for being a resource for our arborists here at Bartlett Tree Experts.
Hey, you're welcome, Victor. Call anytime. Great to see you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Welcome to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Green, gardening, and environment radio with just a soupçon of humor. Or is that a dash? Brought to you by Bartlett Tree Experts. Every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com. Here they are again, Peggy Malecki and Mike Nowak.
All I need is good food to eat and make me healthy, wealthy, wide awake. Lettuce, tomatoes, rutabaga. What about those sweet potatoes? All I need is good food to eat. All I need is good food to eat. All I need is good tools to make me music, porches, lawn serene. Give me all that I can.
And welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. And Peggy, I just realized I did a big screw up. I forgot to load up this week's show into Facebook and YouTube.
That's why I typed in right at the beginning. Here's what we're talking about today.
You typed in where? Oh, you mean on the chat?
In the chat, yeah. Yeah, and spelled artificial wrong and got corrected right away.
Oh, man. I knew I forgot something. I was so happy. I was like, oh, I got everything done. Here we go. We're all set to go. And
we're talking compost. Well,
and
okay, so now we're talking birds. And if you saw that Bartlett spot, it had the cedar waxwing in it.
Is that what that was? I had no idea. No clue. Bob, do you confirm that?
I wasn't watching probably as closely as I should have been. But
that's
normally we'd be on the lookout for cedar waxwings, and red cedars are pretty cool. I hope that people don't take them out anymore, because they're just awesome trees, and they're actually useful for some birds and
well, that's the point they were making. I mean, I'm glad that our sponsor, Bartlett Tree Experts, did that.
It was like in stereo.
Explanation of the apple cedar rust, because that it's really hard to explain to people how that works, and they did an excellent job of that. And the
it's
idea
a really
that
weird looking fungus when it's growing. And
it is. It is.
It.
And the idea that we would just remove all the eastern red cedars within miles of an apple orchard, that's very human. Okay, that is us as a species. Let's get rid of. Oh, we don't like that. That's causing a problem with our apples. Well, apples are more important than cedars, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
So we're going to
imagine.
Yeah,
what all the effects of that would be.
We will destroy. I know we're just so stupid sometimes. I just cannot get over the stupidity of humans at some point. But at least we don't do that anymore. So now we can control it. And and the point they make, there are treatments for that. And as you know, I'm not a huge fan of chemicals, but at some point, if you can control the apple cedar rust, maybe that's a good thing. And then you're not destroying all the cedars. So, call an arborist if you've got an issue, or learn from that and go study up on it and learn how to protect your plants. And that guy in the middle is Bob Dolgan from This Week in Birding. He's also a filmmaker and creator of Turnstone. What is it? Turnstone something.
Strategies.
Right, Turnstone strategies.
Strategies. Couldn't remember. I know. At any rate, and also, is it there? Yeah. I never open those. No, it is. It's actually open on my computer. There it is. And also the guy who created the Monty and Rose films. That one of which is going to be on WTTW public television in Chicago this afternoon at 4 p.m. Central. Are you excited about that?
I am, yeah. And I only realized this weekend that it's also Mother's Day, so we get to celebrate Rose, which Rose is such a ferocious mom protecting her chicks out at Montrose Beach, and I'm like, great, this is Mother's Day. It's perfect. It's a perfect Mother's Day film. So
but she's not there.
Where is
However,
Rose?
she's not there. So we'll still celebrate Rose, and she is not back yet.
All right,
Hopefully
let's
she
let's
will be
for
back.
folks who are not familiar with this, let's set the scene because
Who is Monty and Rose? Or who
Well,
are
Monty and Rose are piping plovers, and if you don't know what a piping plover is, they're a type of shorebird species that's a little bit bigger than a sparrow and smaller than a robin, and they're very rare. They only are in a handful of places around the Great Lakes. They're federally endangered. We have about 74 pairs remaining on the lakes, and Monty and Rose chose to nest in Chicago 3 years ago, and the past 3 years now. And I think surprised everybody by becoming the first piping plovers to nest in the city since 1948. So, Monty and Rose are just amazing birds, and a lot of people. They brought a whole community together of birders and others to protect them and learn about birds. Just a lot of people have gotten into birding because of Monty and Rose. So,
and I would say even
Actually,
learning about protecting shoreline.
I know. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and learning about protecting birds and learning about protecting shoreline and habitat as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just, birds are just phenomenal ambassadors for the natural world because, like Monty and Rose, their story touches on climate change, touches on water quality, invasive species, coastal erosion, you name it. And they're just fabulous. And they wouldn't be there without the habitat restoration that's taken place at Montrose Beach Dunes over the past 20 years or so.
Well, and right, I'm glad you brought that up because that's something I was going to say is that you mentioned how they decided to nest here. It's possible, we don't know for sure, it's possible they wouldn't have done that without the restoration efforts at Montrose Beach. And so hats off to all the people who have worked so hard over the last 20 years to restore that area and continue to work hard. I was reading just the other day that a bunch of willows were taken out, which is going to disturb some people. They're going to say, "Oh, what are you doing? You can't take out those trees." Well, they're barely trees. I mean, they're small. They're more like shrubs. But they are also places where raptors and predators can prey on piping plovers like Monty and Rose.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the more cover that's out there, the worse it is for birds, shorebirds like Monty and Rose, and it just makes for more perches where raptor species can kind of hang out, and that limits their view of the beach. The plovers can't see the whole beach because there's a lot of foliage there. So, and I don't think these are particularly endangered or threatened plant species, the willows that were taken out. So. Yes, and I think in a normal kind of dune successional habitat, I'm not sure you'd have willows right there like that anyway. I think it's just something that's kind of popped up because Montrose, it's an urban beach. Things happen there that aren't, the same as what would probably happen out in the wild. But but they took out those willows, and that actually opens up the space for Monty and Rose. And when you're talking about how endangered they are and representative of their species, it's like, great. Well, let's try to protect them. So that's good to make sure that they live long enough to keep repopulating plovers.
Well, and that brings us to the idea that, well, they nested there, for 3 years? And it produced offspring. Their grandparents, we've watched some of their
grandparents.
We've watched their offspring pop up on Lake Erie. And it's just a really amazing story, all told. But this year, Monty returned in April, but Rose has yet to show up. So do we have any clue as to where Rose might be?
Well, Monty and Rose go their separate ways each winter. So they're only in the sort of Midwest Chicago area for the summertime, for breeding season.
Hey, I know that kind of relationship. Believe me, it's good. Get away from your partner every once in a while.
Probably a healthy thing for human beings as well as birds to separate on occasion. And so Monty goes down to Texas at Bolivar Flats, which is near Galveston, and Rose goes to Anclote Key, which is near Tarpon Springs, Florida, and they they have both been photographed this winter and other winters in those places. So Monty, we were getting photos of. In fact, we knew that he had left Texas in early April, and knew he was on his way, likely back to Chicago, and that proved to be the case. April 19th, he returned, and then Rose, though, a little harder to photograph her because she's out on an offshore key that requires a catamaran or kayak ride, and not too many people get out there to take pictures of the birds, from what I've been told. And so she hasn't been photographed since February, and so it's a little worrisome she hasn't returned back to Montrose, because the birds have come back the past 2 years very in quick succession. In fact, in 2020 it was on the same day, May 1st. So it's a little worrisome she hasn't been back, but there have been other years where Rose did come back later, like 2019. And reports from other locations that have piping plover populations are that not all their plovers are back from Florida yet either. I think it may be a
spring weather-wise.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a cold spring, kind of across the northern tier of the U.S., and there haven't been a lot of warm fronts that have moved quite in the right direction. At least that's what I'm hoping, because the birds utilize the sort of warm fronts, the jet stream, to take flight.
Well, I blame Ron DeSantis. All right, whatever happens. Okay.
So is Monty still hanging out at Montrose Beach?
Yeah, so Monty has been at Montrose Beach. He's still hanging out. He's been over in the protected dune area. He's been on the pier. So he, by all accounts, is doing well. And we had one little kind of funny thing that happened where another plover showed up and Monty started courting her. These are the things that happen in the world of birds and piping plovers. It's not always neat and tidy. And so, but she did not, she took off. She did not accept his advances.
Not interested.
And not interested. So, but that just shows how this helps teach people about how how the avian world works. It's very, very different from even within birds. Just to know how plovers, what their behavior is, it's different for plovers versus the robins that are nesting in my backyard.
And there was a plover that showed up at Rainbow Beach. Now, did that move on to? I thought I saw Michigan Beach at this point.
Yes. Yeah. That one moved on. It was Rainbow Beach is another great beach. Has great shorebird potential, and that bird moved on to Michigan, up towards Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore, where there's just a huge population of piping plovers.
Yeah, it's a little more isolated than it is down here in Chicago.
Yes.
And that rogue Monty, he is a roux. He's a roué.
He's just a cat.
I think the word got to Rose. Rose heard.
So we've got the big day coming up next Saturday. Some people, the Cornell Ornithological Program calls it Big Day. Some people call it World Migratory Bird Day. There's International Migratory Bird Day, but it's all on the 14th. But you were doing a count. And a lot of people do counts on Bird
and
Day.
there were some bird counts yesterday.
But but you were doing one yesterday, Bob. What'd you see?
All right. Well, I've got to say, I was not in the most prolific birding area, but
you told me about this.
I did the place where I was assigned, which is a cemetery in Niles called St. Adelbert's. The idea behind
on Milwaukee
the
Avenue,
bird count,
yes,
across
from White Eagle.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, I love it. And so, yes, but the idea behind a bird count is you try to kind of census as many locations as you can on a given day. And so that was where I went. And it's a big cemetery. It took me about an hour to drive around the whole thing. There are only scattered trees. There isn't much in the way of habitat, but it is a green space. And so it provides something. And so like robins were probably the most common species. I had 37 robins. Which was down from last year when I had about 125.
Wow.
And grackles were numerous, common grackles, which is a type of blackbird. had a lot of chipping sparrows, which is a migratory sparrow that's up in this area now, which was fun, and just a couple of warbler species, yellow rump warbler and palm warbler. But it was it's interesting to just see a place like that. I would say the grackles there are pretty prolific. I think they must nest there because there are about 10 to 12 of them, and they're semi-colonial, so they were in like a cluster of trees, pine. I'm not sure what type of pine that they were in, but it was an evergreen or conifer. So, but yeah, so there's some birds. I wouldn't say it was the most exciting birding I've ever done, but that's part of what you do. And cemeteries can be surprisingly good places to go. And they can harbor a lot of birds at times, and even rare ecosystems.
So how does a bird count work? I mean, now I've done bird counts down at the lake, but for listeners who might not be aware, how do you count birds on a bird count?
Well, I think of it as just a more serious kind of focused birding efforts. Like many a birder will keep a list while out on a birding outing. And I think it's just the difference would be just that you're literally keeping track of individual numbers and species. I would say when I'm actually on a count, I'm taking more care to note every species and every individual. And, you can use an app or you can use a notebook and just keep track with tally marks of every individual and every species. Then
in a
you
given
do submit the data.
time frame.
Yeah, the time frame, the number of miles walked or driven, what were the weather conditions, and then you provide that data to the count coordinator, and this happens in usually spring and around Christmas time for the Christmas bird count, and then that data is submitted to a larger data set that gives people a real good sense of what's happening as far as bird trends in that particular year, and then they can roll it up into multiple years and you really start to learn some things. So but yeah, it's just probably being more focused than say my everyday kind of just stroll around the nearby forest preserve. It just being a little more systematic probably than usual.
Well, let's look at some birds. These are not from yesterday. But these are some birds. I know.
No, they're definitely not from
And I'm
yesterday.
kind of interested why you saw so few robins compared to last year. That just seems a little odd, doesn't it?
Yeah, it did to me too. I because robins have been just so numerous in the sort of since March for at least the places I've been going to. So all I could think is that they, for whatever reason, have started to nest and have gotten to wherever they need to go, which is contrary to what my suspicion would be given how cold it's been. So all I can think is that they, for whatever reason, there wasn't a wave of robins moving through yesterday, and there was a year ago around the same time. Maybe last year was slightly earlier in May, if I recall correctly. It was sort of strange.
Yeah.
But other birds were more common this year versus last year, like the chipping sparrows. Last year, I don't think I had any warblers. So it just also shows like how variable birding can be in bird behavior.
I did see a couple, anecdotal, but I saw a couple of Facebook posts from other people who were on the Illinois ornithological count yesterday saying there were fewer birds where they were counting too. They were surprised.
Yeah, well, and again, it might have to do with the weather. It's hard to say right now. It might have to do with we're losing species hand over fist, but other than that,
let's hope it's not the case.
Yeah, let's hope that's not the case. Well, let's. So, what have we got here?
Okay, here's an eastern bluebird. It's either a young male or a female, but you can see here the sort of reddish tone, orange to red tone of the flanks and the upper chest, and the bright blue wings. If it was a adult male, you'd see just this electric blue all on all of the back and the entirety of the head.
And by the way, you took all these photos, right?
Yeah, I did take. I want to make sure. I think I did take all these photos. Yes.
I hope so. I don't
I
want
want
you
to make
sending.
sure I remember what I gave you.
um,
If I didn't, I'll give credit to anybody else. Okay, so this is an osprey. I took this picture in Yellowstone National Park last August, and they've returned now to the Chicago area. Sometimes called the fish hawk because uh, they prey on fish. They're amazing uh, fishers and anglers, and they plunge into the water after their prey. And it's often confused with the bald eagle, but this is a much smaller bird with
Have they
crooked
been
wings.
spotted? Have they been spotted nesting at Skokie Lagoons yet this year?
I don't know about Skokie Lagoons. I know they hadn't been back yet over at Paul Douglas Forest Preserve, I heard. Or was it? No, sorry, it was Moraine Hills State Park. But those are all places where you can look for them. Powderhorn Lake on the far southeast side is a great place to look. They have an osprey platform. So they have taken to the platforms that have been installed in recent years, which has been great because I think just they have a kind of special niche that isn't like, the where the bald eagles are. And so it's important to take care of the ospreys as well. So this again, yeah, these photos were not taken this weekend. This is a common raven, which is not going to be a bird you're going to see in the Chicago area. We have basically no records in Chicago since something like the turn of the 20th century. But this is a large corvid species, bigger than a crow, often confused with crows. Crows are often confused for ravens, and this was taken in Wyoming also last summer, and they're just super fun to watch. We were in a viewing area for, actually it was Old Faithful Geyser, and they were just sort of entertaining the crowd here, picking up various things, and they're corvids are among our most intelligent birds, so I feel like it's fitting that this one's doing, I don't know what it's doing with that stick, but but they're one of the species. They can recognize individual human beings. There have been some experiments done where they have a form of intelligence which is pretty incredible.
So if you see a blackbird in the Chicago area, it ain't going to be a raven. It's
no. I've had to really push back on that. Like some people saying, like, I know I saw a raven in Chicago. I'm like, no, you didn't see her. And I don't want to completely decry someone's excitement, but it really is unlikely that that anyone would see a raven in Chicago. They did have a couple over by Indiana Dunes not too long ago, a year ago. All right, great horned owlets. This is from the forest preserves along the North Branch of the Chicago River, and so this nest had two owlets, and they appeared to make it to fledging. When I took this picture, they were kind of venturing farther and farther out from the nest, and they were a little bit late in hatching. They hatched around, I want to say it was late. It was hard to know exactly because they're about 50 feet up in a tree, but it was late March, early April. Which
what
late
year?
Last year.
Okay.
And so a little bit late. Owl nesting season is very active, basically in the winter. So I was like, I don't know what happened, why that was, and I'm not really sure if that affects like the likelihood of their survival looking ahead. But I've gone back to the same site. I've not seen the owls, but I know I've heard and seen on social media a couple of other owl nests sort of along the same corridor along the North Branch, a little bit farther north than where this was. And I wonder if those are the same owls or maybe not. Maybe they're just different owls. But these birds their parents were fairly common in my neighborhood, which is just sort of a suburban like neighborhood. You'd hear them calling at night and stuff. They're very, very entertaining and fun to kind of follow their story last year.
Boy, if I ever saw anything like that, I would freak out. I go, it's an owl, an owl. I think I've seen exactly one owl in the wild in my entire life, and it was in the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, okay. Well, we've got to get you out and
Yeah.
see. Yeah. You got to get out and add to your owl list. Yeah, no, they're definitely around, and definitely several species. We're kind of generally sort of getting out of the season when it's easier to see them as trees leaf out. That's an issue. This photograph is very representative of that, because I was having a harder and harder time just even finding them and seeing them, and I found this little hole in the foliage to take this picture. But yeah, in the wintertime, there are a handful of owl species that are fairly easy to find in the right place.
All right, let's hit the right button here. Here we go.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I did not take this picture. I have to credit
okay.
my friend Fred Newport, who took this picture. But he said I could use this picture for anything I ever wanted. So
what type of warbler are we looking at here?
Yeah, it's a prothonotary warbler, and prothonotary warbler is just a stunning bird. They're called the golden swamp candles of sort of the bottomland forests of the South and the Midwest, and so we're at about the northern extent of their range. Some do nest in Wisconsin, but here you're looking at places like Skokie Lagoons, or maybe kind of southwest toward the Palos region. Although in migration, I just had one in my nearest forest preserve about a week ago. They're somewhat common if you're along like the North Branch of the river or other waterways. They're stunning birds. They do nest. They're willing to nest in nest boxes, and also tree cavities being their sort of historical home. So they're just stunning birds, and they like to be around water. They used to be called the swamp warbler, the golden swamp warbler, and so they have a beautiful, just really clear, resonant song that they sing, and they're fairly engaging, like with people. I really don't know why that is, but they almost seem like less afraid of people than other species in my experience. Oh my gosh, who played that? And one other fun fact. What is prothonotary? Like, what does that word mean? I'm not a word I've ever heard in any other context, but with this particular bird. And what a prothonotary is, or was a monk who wore these yellow or golden robes, kind of in the Byzantine Empire, and often the word notary is in there. A monk who was also a clerk of some type, putting like data in the Byzantine Empire. So that's where the prothonotary comes from. Notary would be like maybe another way to say it.
And our friend Marta says she sees them along the Fox River.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I mean, I had one along the Illinois River last year. I was down in the Springfield area.
All right, knock it off, Peggy.
So they're down in the Springfield area along a creek near the Sangamon River. So yeah, they can be somewhat common, and it's just always a treat. They literally brighten up, the woods with their presence.
And the last photo here, is this yours?
Yeah, this is mine. All right, so yeah, this one's not going to win any photography contests or most beautiful bird awards. But it's a clay-colored sparrow, probably one of the most drab birds, other than like sort of our everyday house sparrows or song sparrows. But I like to think of it in the positive, in that they're just a unique sparrow. They're not super common around here. They barely nest in Illinois. They have a buzzy insect-like song that could easily be written off as just like some type of locust or grasshopper or something. But no, it is a sparrow. And they also don't behave like sparrows. They go up in the trees more and kind of flit around, and they look like warblers, kind of hunting for insects. So that clay-colored sparrow is kind of kind of fun.
What's the
Once you
app?
figure out
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
they look a little different from chipping sparrows and others, you
Yeah.
start to notice them
And
more.
I was
Go
going
on.
to play the chipping sparrow too, because that's a sound that you hear, but might not know what it is,
Yeah,
because it can be.
yeah. And they're small birds and they blend in well, so it's pretty easy to overlook them. But yeah, the chipping sparrow has an insect-like almost trill as well.
What app are
And
you
this is
using there?
this is just the Cornell Lab.
Ah, okay, because
You can go out,
you introduced me to
There's
another
Merlin.
app. Yeah.
Merlin, yeah.
What was the? But what? Wait. Here's the other app.
Song Sleuth.
Right.
Song Sleuth.
Song Sleuth is another one that.
Bob, you've probably got some apps that you like as well.
Well, Merlin, I like, and their sound ID function is pretty fun, just to kind of open it up while you're in the woods and just see what you hear.
Yeah.
But another website that's incredible is Xeno Canto, XENO hyphen Canto, CANTO, and it's just like an online database that users have uploaded all these bird songs from around the world.
Wow.
Pretty much every species under the sun, and they might have an app too, but I didn't find it quite as user friendly. But yeah, so they're we've come a long way with birding technology, and you can with the Sound ID app. I mean, that's really powerful. Although not to kind of disrespect it at all, it messed up a little on a couple of of songs, and so I was like, no, there's no way that particular species was here.
What I like on the Cornell
Yeah,
Lab, and this isn't the app, the Cornell Lab is the website. If you go into listening to bird songs, it will pull up all the sparrows.
Yeah.
So you can easily just hit each one and go, oh, okay, that's the white-throated, or whatever, if you're trying to figure out which one it is.
Right, and I mislabeled them
fun.
earlier. It's actually the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and I've got a link to them and to Global Big Day and to World Migratory Bird Day. Those links are there on the blog post. And finally, before we let you go, we have to have you comment on that article that was in The Guardian very recently. This is one of the funniest things ever. That the University of Essex did a study and determined that birding is one of the most boring hobbies ever. And they ranked it actually below stamp collecting, and you apparently did stamp collecting, and you beg to differ.
Oh yeah. I mean, God, stamp collecting. Oh my gosh. I mean, it was just nothing but stamps in a book. Like you weren't even outside. I mean, whereas like I think about all the things that birding is, all the ways I've experienced birds and the things I've done to go see birds, the lengths I've gone to, the trips I've taken. Like, I mean, that's much more exciting. The thrill of discovery, of finding a bird you didn't expect to find in a certain place on a certain day. There's just so much to it, but I could go on. But yeah, no, the stamp collecting, and it was like, people thought stamp collecting was more fun. All sorts of other things. Journalism and acting were two of the most fun things.
Journalism, I don't think journalism is fun.
And acting, that's like
now acting is actually really hard work. Okay, I don't know if you realize that, but if you want to be a good actor, you're going to have to work very, very hard. Knowing, having been sort of a fair to middling actor in my day. But I ran a theater company for 10 years in Chicago, and thought, so. I've done that. I've done the acting, the writing, the directing, did the whole showbiz
play
thing.
Jimmy Stewart on the show every so
That's
often.
right, and I do stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well. Okay. Maybe you can be in a documentary if I ever need a scripted role. But
yeah.
Absolutely.
You know what?
I actually was looking for a proto notary, somebody to put on a golden robe and be a proto notary.
I would do that. I would do that for you.
Mike has worn a bee suit.
I've worn a bee suit. I've worn a who's the Planters Peanut guy? I've worn that suit in the past. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
A little bit of everything.
We actually have a question for Bob too.
Oh, okay.
From Deb.
All right.
She says, when doing a bird count, how do you know you're not counting the same bird more than once?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's just
Meaning we
being
don't know.
we don't completely know, but I like to think that they're, you can sort of, I try to get a feel for, like, am I in a different sort of place, like a different part, like at the cemetery, there are like sort of, maybe four big sections, and like, am I in a completely different section? And if it's like some of the warblers, they're not going to be flying like all the way across like several hundred acres or whatever, like at a moment's notice. So I'm pretty sure I encounter like individual separate warblers. Same with like sparrows. It's an inexact science, but like the blue jays, there were a lot of blue jays flying around yesterday, and I ended up counting 7. And I do wonder if that was maybe, could it have been 4? But it just seemed like there were so many, and it was like I saw one by Milwaukee Avenue. I saw one over on the other side of the cemetery. It seemed like there were a lot of blue jays. So it is hard to know. But generally, that's also why we have separate territories. So it's like I'm counting over at St. Adelbert, Tom's counting over at Bunker Hill Forest Preserve, someone else is counting at, Edgebrook Woods. So
And the birds are
definitely not counting the same birds, most likely.
Well, no, I'm thinking the birds are messing with you, and they're all saying, "Okay, we got the guy at the cemetery. Now let's fly over to the other site," and they'll think it's a different bird, and that's how they do that.
They'll put on glasses or a hat and be a different bird. Yeah.
And a mustache, and a weird, and a funny mustache.
Yeah, they try to like sneak up on you and sneak behind you. But no, I did have on the Christmas bird count 2 years ago. I think it was like 40 tundra swans flew over a big swath of like the west and southwest suburbs, and like 5 different groups of birders counted 40 tundra swans. So that was pretty clear that was the same, flock of birds that flew over. So you just counted as 40.
And then there were three French hens, 2 turtle doves, and just counting here.
I'm sensing another
partridge in a Bradford pear tree.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
in a Bradford pear tree. Yeah, absolutely. Just the scariest thing ever on the planet. All right. So if you want to read about Bob's response to the Essex study about boring hobbies, go to This Week in Birding. In fact, you can subscribe to This Week in Birding. And get his reports. In fact,
That would be
I'm trying to remember the last.
Chicago. TWIBchicago.com. I put the link up.
Yeah, well, and if you go to the blog post, that's there too, as well. So, what did we miss, Bob? I think we'll just tell people if you want to celebrate the World Migratory Bird Day. It's 14th, although some of the counts have already been done in Chicago. You guys need to get your act together, get all on the same page. Wouldn't that be a good thing? But what do I know about
a big one up at the Hackamatack Preserve on the 14th.
Okay.
There's a list on the show blog of some of the ones.
Oh, yes.
I mean, counting birds is a great thing to do, and it like anybody can do it, and it can happen at any time. It doesn't have to be a formal effort, but it does add to the overall. It gives scientists more information about what's happening with birds, so it has a real value. It's fun and it's meaningful, which I think is great. So.
Yeah, and it's boring. Just absolutely.
And everything I just said probably be really boring to the audience.
Oh, I'm sorry. Were we talking about birding here? Oh, just so sorry about that. All right, and now more bird calls. All right, Bob Dolgan, thank you so much for being on the show, and happy birding. You and I will be, and keep an eye out for Rose. Let us know when she shows up.
I'll let you know.
All right, it's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. More to come when we return. From spring seed and soil treatments to summer foliar feeding to fall stubble digesters, Blazing Star provides microbial tools from tiny biologicals for natural and organic farmers. They have solutions for home gardeners too. And Blazing Star also offers agroecological education and consulting, especially for permaculture work in zones 4 and 5. Learn more about these great folks and great techniques at blazing-star.com.
I was pretty well considered an outlier in nuts. And today, the nursery with the kids and everybody involved is still considered groundbreaking in the sense that we do it just different. Over in a possibility place in 1978. By 1982, we were strictly into natives and have been ever since.
Possibility Place Nursery grows more trees, shrubs, and perennials than I can count. Several hundred species, from large shade trees to very small perennial plants.
There is a native plant for every place in your yard. From trees to shrubs to flowers and grasses. They flower just as pretty. They flower on time. They bring in butterflies. They make a yard more dynamic. And every time you do a planting is an opportunity to add a native or to integrate a native into your landscape and make it richer.
Birds are on the wing this spring, headed to their summer breeding grounds. And along the way, they'll stop at wetlands, forests, fields, and cities. Why cities? Urban areas can offer important habitat for migratory birds. Hi, I'm Jessie Berry from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. On Saturday, May 14th, I'll be heading to New York City with the rest of the lab's Team Sapsucker for some urban birding and Big Day 2022. We'll have 24 hours to find as many species of birds as possible to raise funds for conservation.
Tens of millions of birds are migrating up the Atlantic Flyway. Some travel as far away as the Andes, Central America, and the Caribbean. New York City is a critical stopover point for thrushes, vireos, flycatchers, warblers, and more. Birds use city parks and other green areas to rest and refuel for their long migration.
Big Day is one of our largest fundraisers of the year and ensures that our conservation projects have the support they need to make a difference for birds. Help Team Sapsucker make every bird count.
Go to birds.cornell.edu/bigday to learn more about our urban birding adventure and how you can help.
And there you
So
go.
speaking of birds,
Yeah.
we didn't talk with Bob about what you've spotted in your yard.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, I did the other day when we were,
No,
setting
but
up.
on the air, because you're usually saying you got a couple of robins,
Yeah.
a bunch of sparrows, maybe a woodpecker.
10,000
You-
sparrows is what I
You got a
get.
fancy visitor right now.
I've got, what do you mean, a fancy visitor right now? Well, I've got what we've seen in the past. We see robins, we see cardinals definitely. We see the downy woodpeckers. Actually, saw a hairy woodpecker in the yard. And lately we've seen rose-breasted grosbeaks, rose-breasted grosbeak. I don't know if there's more than one. A yellow
You've
rumped.
probably seen the female. You just haven't. It's brown.
All right. Well, then probably it looked like a sparrow to me. And the yellow rumped warbler. And the coolest one, I think, is the ruby crowned kinglet, which we've seen in the yard. Little tiny bird just flits around like crazy. And we managed to ID that. And so we've had a few here in our. But you know what? He mentioned jays. We never see a jay. I've never seen a
No,
blue.
and I see them a lot.
I never see one in my yard. I've never seen one here.
So
Nor
I am
nor even red-winged blackbirds. And they're like
Well, I'll send you mine. They're everywhere.
they're crazy in Humboldt Park, which is just a few blocks away, maybe a half a mile. And none of that here. So
Now I know I've been playing bird calls, but the rose-breasted grosbeak people may have heard in trees, and it sounds similar to a robin. See if I can.
it does sound, yeah.
Yeah, it's just a little more warbly than a robin. So there you go. You're familiar with the robin, which is my phone ring. So
Right. Oh, is that your phone ring? Okay. Because then and my friend Mac has frogs, I think, or is it crickets or something like that? It's like I don't know.
Crickets.
What do I know? Speaking of, okay, I have a show and tell here behind
Yeah,
me.
and the show and tell behind it we have to talk about too.
Oh my goodness, yes. All right. Look at this. This is my
Ooh.
Hibiscus sinensis. And this is a story in itself. It's blooming because it has been not under my happy leaf grow lights, but adjacent to them. A little ding for happy leaf. I put them on the side. Okay. Here's the deal with this plant. All right, this plant I've had maybe for 15 years. I don't even know which one it is.
Or where it came from.
Some kind of hybrid. I got it as a gift. Somebody gave it. Well, I interviewed a hibiscus guy back when I was at Gargantua Radio, and he sent me one of these. All right, and it was tiny, and I need to prune it desperately. But what happened is, a couple of years ago, it just stopped blooming, or like several years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, it just stopped blooming. I went, oh, okay, I probably need to repot the poor thing, and I emptied out the pot that was there, and it was nasty. I mean, no wonder it wasn't blooming. I was surprised it was alive, because at the bottom, of course, I had styrofoam popcorn, which before I realized, back in the day when I didn't know,
Before you knew better.
before I knew better, that you don't put pebbles and popcorn at the bottom of your pot. You just put soil.
That's what they were saying 15 years ago.
Yeah, they were. It was a big deal. It was like, oh, it'll help your drainage. Well, this science now shows that it doesn't. It hinders the drainage. So I had the popcorn in there, and the soil was nasty. It was tired, and I hadn't switched it out in years. And I thought, well, no wonder the thing's not blooming. And so I replaced the soil, did my homemade potting mix. I added a little compost. I had a soilless mix, and then I even put biochar in there, and waited. And this was beginning of last year. Nothing. And I thought, well, that's okay. It's got to rest. It's got to get its energy back. And it leafed out rather nicely, and it was fine. And then over the winter, I did a really dumb thing. We were setting up an apartment for some friends who were staying over, and we put a ZZ plant in there, and I said, let me grab my hibiscus, and I'll put it in there too, so that they have a plant. And we told them, don't worry about it, don't water it. They should have watered it, because hibiscuses love water, and that was really dumb on my part. So by the time I got to it, all the leaves except 2 had dropped off. So it basically had gone into dormancy. And I got it back here, and I brought it home, and I watered it, and I put it next to the happy leaf light, and I put it on the side. So it wasn't getting direct light, it was getting indirect light. It was getting, and then I saw the leaves started to pop up, and I went, oh, that's good. And then I saw the buds start to come up. And then it still got 2 or 3 buds on there. I had one bloom the other day. I have the one you just saw. Whoops, don't knock it over. And and a couple more, they're going to pop in the next few days. And I went, holy smoke. You wouldn't expect it to bloom in May, because if I put it out in the yard, it might bloom in July.
But it's inside under the light.
But it's inside under the lights and very happy, because it's under a happy leaf. So there you go. And now I will still put it outside, and I might even prune it back once the blooms are done. Usually you prune these things in the spring. And I'm just going to wait till things bloom, and it needs to be a little more compact. It's a little rangy at the moment. But there's a story of my hibiscus.
There you go. Now let's talk about the story behind it. Chicago Excellence in Gardening Awards.
Yes. In fact, I can even pop up something, because I've
through the magic
of
the internet.
I can't remember to put the right title of the show and the explanation up on our social media, but I can certainly put this up here. Okay, and we want people who live in Chicago to enter the Chicago Excellence in Gardening Awards. Just go to chicagogardeningawards.org, and we've started to get folks registering their garden.
Already.
Oh yeah, we've got entries. And it's especially after this week, once we get some warm weather, I think
Yeah.
folks will be a little more interested in it.
And we're back in person judging, as it says here. Last 2 years we've done virtual. This year we'll be back in people's gardens.
Yep, and you get those wonderful signs that are all weather and will last forever. Uh-oh, go grab a sign. I know I could run and get one too. Don't knock over the lamp. Don't knock over Basil the dog. Uh-oh, Peggy's gone. What are you doing?
I was under my desk getting it.
Holy smoke. All right, there you go. And you get those wonderful signs, and they are all weather, and they last forever. And what?
You can't see it. We're still looking at the...
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at it in preview. Because I don't know how to do anything right today. So there you go. Those are the signs that are made by the Forest Preserve District of Cook County. And they're a great partner for Chicago Excellence in Gardening Award. So go to our webpage, go to our Facebook page. I haven't posted on our Twitter page, and I need to do that. So I will do that and
Share
take
it
care
with anyone you know in Chicago. We are looking for, it is a volunteer-run organization, 501c3. We are looking for people who want to be judges. You don't have to live in the city of Chicago to be a judge. And looking for people to help on committees. So if you want to join in, or if you've got a group, you can go to the website. There's a whole media kit up there too. If you want to forward to people you know, put it on your social media. We've got a press release up there. We've got graphics. We've got everything. Thanks to Kathleen and Mike and everybody on the committee who's helping.
Yeah, some great people on the committee who have been helping us do that. So I'm going to say the Green Dispatch is up on the website. I put all that up, did all that work, and of course we're not going to get to it.
But there's a lot of really interesting stuff to read up there, including a lot on birds and something hopefully we can touch on in the coming weeks of heat waves in India and Pakistan.
Yeah, speaking of weather stuff, hey, why not? Let's pop this up that I got from the National Weather Service. Now Tuesday, they're saying Tuesday and Wednesday, look at 83 to 89, Wednesday 82 to 91. Yikes. That's just...
Well, look at the overnight temperatures.
Yeah. They're higher than our daytime temperatures have been for the last few weeks.
I mean, I can do away with fleece and boots for a few days.
I think so. And then we'll probably go back into the 30s and get snow. Who knows what's going to happen. But today is spring. Yesterday was spring. Today's spring. And then we go, Monday, also depending on where you are. And then
if you live by the lake, it stays in spring. But the big thing is it'll be humid, so it's going to feel like spring and summer.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the stories, as you said, there's a ridiculous heat wave going on in India and Pakistan. It just sounds horrible. But, you got to consider they're not that far above the equator. The Tropic of Cancer splits India in half. So even though they're in the northern hemisphere, they're considered a tropical country. So
there's just if you read the one article that you posted, there's some it's talking about climate change and the heat waves, but also talking about how cleaning up smog in the atmosphere may even make them worse. It's an odd dichotomy.
Which is weird, isn't it? The idea that you could make it worse by making the air better. But so take a look at that. Another article. I mean, it's not happy stuff. Most of it's not happy stuff. Populations declining for 48% of the world's bird species.
That's a new study out on birdwatchingdaily.com.
Yeah. And an article by our friend Carrie Gillum, who we need to have back on the show, about disasters, those we see and those we don't. And what she talks about is, tornadoes, you see that, but the chemicals that are in our environment, you don't see.
The PFAS that we were talking about in the first hour.
On artificial turf and those kinds of things.
Yeah. And a big lawsuit with DuPont and others.
And among the, sublime to the ridiculous, Chicagoans respond to Chicago. Mayor Lightfoot's canned water gimmick is what the Eater Chicago calls it, the gimmick.
Let's can Lake Michigan water and sell it, yes.
And, of course, they're going to put a casino on the Chicago River and light it up like crazy and then watch the birds go drop down. We don't get it. We just refuse to get it. Understand what's going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the total lunar eclipse on May 15th, next Sunday.
Something fun to look forward to. I got to get out of this place if I want to see it. There's very little I can see in the sky in my neighborhood. But
this was actually, do I still have the article up? It was so there's a Chicago Tribune article. It's not the one that you linked, but it's May 15th, starting at 8:32 p.m. But it does talk a little bit why the moon appears red and orange, and it has to do with sunlight's only reaching the moon, passing through the atmosphere. So I'm sure if Rick were here, he would expound on that.
He would explain it, but he ain't. So let us hit the road. Oh, wait a second.
And as Andrew says, the heat is coming because Rick is gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's thank all the people who are on the show today. Yuh Schabacker-Koppel and her son Jocum. Actually, Jocum Schabacker, not just so we know. It is Mary Galea, also, and they are all from Lake Forest, battling against, trying to mitigate the idea of artificial turf up there. Ryan Anderson from Midwest Grows Green. Bob Dolgan from This Week in Birding. Thanks to Kathleen for all her work. No thanks to me for screwing up the listing of it. Thanks to Basil and Lagata. Until next time, go green or
go home.
Birdie, 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 birdie.
How'd you like it? I don't know. I slept through the whole thing. Well, you didn't miss much.